Welcome, everyone. As we are waiting for a few people joining, please use the Google Doc in the either in the Kiko chat or in the chat, in the link I put in the chat. Oh, I don't know how to speak now. Provide your information so we can follow up as well. And I am convening this session together with my colleague Rob Redmond from NOAA. And so he will be our designated note taker for the session. So, and also this session will be recorded like other sessions and will be made available via the ESIP YouTube channel in, believe, sometime in February. Mm-hmm. And now we are 1 minute past the starting time. I'm going to get our session started. Welcome everyone to our session, Making Sense of Open Environmental Data via Model Context Protocol. And I am Dr. Srao, Senior Research Scholar with NOAA Corporate Institute for Satellite Earth System Studies. It's a long name, and also NOAA National Centers for Environmental Information. And I am co-convening this session with my colleague, Rob Redmond, who is the director of NOAA Center for AI. Rob, do you want to say a few words?
Well, thank you. This is an exciting session, and I will be I'm looking forward to being your note taker here. Help me out, though. You can get in the doc and also help me out so that I don't miss anything really good. And it's lovely to be here. So, all right, back to you, Douglas.
Thanks, Rob. And I know we also have 2 ESIP fellows, since we were just talking about how great ESIP fellows are. So I'm going to ask Maddie and Cheyenne introduce themselves. If you haven't seen their overview of their work at the opening plenary, you should watch a recording later. Maddie?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Maddie Allen. I'm a third-year PhD student at Cornell University. I'm also an ESIP fellow this year, which is really exciting. And my work is kind of heavily pivoting towards kind of the deep learning side of things. So I've just been having a lot of fun kind of getting into this space.
Great. Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, go ahead, Cheyenne.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Cheyenne. I'm a postdoc at the University of Arizona. And my work, I'm a ESIP fellow this year too, and my work is about mostly with air quality interactions with climate. And I'm trying to use some kind of AI techniques as well for causal inference. So yeah, excited to be here.
Excellent. Thank you both. And given the size of the audience, we're not going to ask everyone to introduce yourself. But please provide your information in the Google Notes, a Google document for the notes of this session. And I put the link in the chat. And Rob, Maddie, if you don't mind, maybe help us put the link in the chat periodically so people can have that information. And this session is going to be focused on Model Context Protocol, or MCP. And this is going to be a more entry-level session, and we're not diving into the nitty-gritty of how you can set up an MCP right now, but trying to introduce the concept of MCP and some of the experiments in some presentations. But then we're going to go into like an interactive discussion, looking at as a community ESIP and what do we want to see being developed into MCP, and then how ESIP can move forward either through more events like this or some activities to gather a list of those MCP to support the use of open environmental data from different agencies and from different organizations. And to do that, I'm going to start my presentation of Mentimeter. So please, I'm going to put the link to a Mentimeter, trying to understand who is in the room today. So the first question is that, what is your day job? Whether trying to understand who we have here in the session. Okay, data manager, architect, AI engineer, data curator, grad students, research software engineer, NG, I guess. Cool. Excellent. We have a lot of data curators here, which is not surprising as a ESIP audience. Program managers, great to see program managers here, volunteer, students, data analysts. Cool. We have almost 20 people in the poll, so I'm going to give it another 30 seconds so people can finish the entry of this question. Okay, how about maybe let's move on to our next question. Looks like data curator is the dominant groups here, but we also have some active developers and also engineers too. Great. All right. The second question is, how familiar are you with Model Context Protocol, or MCP? Wow, people are quick. There's one person that said you can ask me anything about it. Okay, seems like we have left a leaning tail towards more novice audience on MCP, but we also have people use MCP in their work, and also some people are very proficient about MCPs. I was in another session in a meeting. They had a poll saying, "Why are you here for a meeting?" They entered the question, answer, "My manager asked me to be here." So that is another answer sometimes you may get. Right. Good. It's good to set the stage of who we have here in the session today. With that, I'm going to stop sharing. We will come back to the Mentimeter for a few more questions later on. And we will have two presentations to kick us off, to give intro about MCP and also how to share MCPs. And so first will be Shubham Sabu, who worked with me for the past few months as a developer, and I asked him to do some of the introduction about MCP, and also one of the experiment I asked him to do to work with the NOAA NCEI API to access some of the NOAA data via cloud. And so Shubham, the floor is yours.
Right. Thank you so much, Douglas. Hi, everyone. I'm Shubham Sabu. I recently graduated from NC State University with my master's in computer science. So I have a bit of background in computer science, AI, and stuff. And I closely work with Douglas on multiple projects. And one of the exciting projects that I got to work on was, building an MCP server for the NCEI API. So it was a great opportunity for me to learn about different MCP servers out there. How do you build one? Why do you need one? And so on. So in this session, I'll try my best to, give you a brief introduction of what MCP server is. Why do you need it? How can you build one? And so on. So the first thing that I would like to talk about is so what is a MCP server, or what is the Model Context Protocol? This was a concept which was introduced by Anthropic, as we all know, and basically you're familiar with Claude Desktop. I'm sure many of you must have used it as well. So MCP basically allows you to have those integrations with different data sources with different APIs and different tools with the AI clients that you're using. AI clients as in Claude, ChatGPT, and so on. So today, earlier, before MCP was introduced, the problem that we were facing was that for every AI application, each developer would have to make a custom integration for an API call that they want to make, or for a data source that they want to connect to. And these custom integrations sometimes seem to be very flaky, and there was no standardized way in which you could connect to these particular data sources or to these particular APIs. So that is when MCP was introduced to make sure that our AI applications can easily connect to these different external sources in a much more standardized ways. And you can easily you can think of MCP like a USB-C for AI applications, right? So it is an open source standards, and it connects the AI systems with the different data sources, tools, and so on, workflows, and so on. So once you have that MCP server, where does it fit into your system, right? You have heard about different MCP servers, like Gmail has its own MCP server, Google Calendar has its own MCP server, different databases have got their own MCP servers, AWS has its own MCP server, right? So where does it all fit in? So there are like various AI applications or AI clients that are out there. For this example, I can take an example of Claude, right? As a user, you would want to insert a natural language query. You would want to ask Claude, hey, can you schedule an appointment, or can you schedule a reminder in my Google Calendar for 9 p.m. next Sunday for my medicines? And using just that user query, our Claude should be able to analyze what is the task that is assigned. It should be able to connect to Google Calendar through the Google Calendar MCP server, and then it should be able to schedule that reminder in the Google Calendar itself. So that is how the entire flow should work, like from the user query to the appointment that is to be scheduled. So for users, it gives you a natural language access to complex data and tools without the technical expertise. For developers, it helps to build against a standard protocol instead of maintaining separate connectors. And for organizations like Google or Anthropic or even NCEI and NOAA, it gives you a secure, controlled, reusable integrations across teams and departments. So during this journey where I got to build an MCP server, I realized that there are three essential steps that you want to follow when you are building an MCP server, and what you need beforehand if you want to build an MCP server, right? So the first thing that at NCEI, I noticed that there are like different APIs that we have got access to. And a lot of folks use these APIs for different uses, right? So if I want to make sure that my AI application is able to access or able to use that APIs, I would want to use an MCP server instead, so that I don't have to do like custom integrations. So once I have an MCP server for an API in place, I can use it to connect to any of my AI applications, whether it be Claude or whether it be ChatGPT or any other custom AI application that I want to work with. So once you have the API, you would want to get a thorough understanding of that API. What are the different endpoints? What are the different parameters? And what is the authentication requirements? Who is allowed to use that API, or is it open source? Anyone can use it, and so on. Once you get a deep understanding of the API, like what are the required parameters that you want to pass to fetch a particular data set, or so on. Next comes that using that particular understanding that you have got, you design the MCP tools for that particular API. So you hide the complexities of those APIs behind those MCP tools, and you try to have a clear descriptive name for those comprehensive parameter schemas. Once you write down that MCP tools in the MCP server, You can implement and test it using different testing ways. You can do that. For custom integration, it was, earlier very difficult when you wanted to test, because sometimes those integration failed. It worked on one application, but it did not work on another application. But MCP provides you a much standardized way to do so. Sorry. Yeah. So the challenge, what was the challenge? Now, NOAA's National Centers for Environmental Information, it holds millions of weather observations. It's spanning decades across thousands of stations worldwide, right? So what I realized was that I was a bit new to this API. I was a bit new to environmental science in general. So to understand this particular API, I had to dive deeper into the documentation, make sure I figure out, okay, what does a data set look like? What does the different data types look like? Why do you need a station ID and so on? So to understand that, I had to dive deeper into it. And that's when I realized that, if I'm a very new user to this entire platform, how can I reduce that initial friction that is there to analyze any particular data or to access any particular data in the first place? So for that, I realized that, once you are using AI applications like Claude, you can easily access that particular data if an MCP solution is in place. So for this particular API, I created two different tools. I created the fetch data tool, which uses the NCEI ADS API endpoint, and it fetches the data, any kind of data that you want, whether it you just need to provide the dataset type, data range, stations, data types, and output format. But you do not need to explicitly provide it. Also, we'll see it in the demo that I show you. The next tool that I made was the find the nearest station tool. Station ID is one of the parameters that is required. The stations are necessary to find out, if you want to find a temperature at a particular place. Let's say you want to find the temperature in Austin, or if you want to find the temperature in Dallas, you need to find those station IDs to find out any of the data types that you may require. So find nearest station tool was another API, that is the NOAA CDO API that I used for creating this particular tool. So this is what the data flow looks like, right? If the user asks in Claude, what was the rainfall in Dallas last week? The Claude should analyze this particular user query, and it interprets the natural language and determines the required data. Here it will identify, okay, the user is asking me for rainfall data. The location is Dallas. And from last week, it will derive the start date and the end date that is required for that particular API call. Once it has that particular data, it will try to fetch what is the data that it needs. It will call the find nearest station tool to locate the nearest weather station in Dallas, and it finds that particular weather station. Once it has that, then it will use the fetch data tool to query the NCEI API with station ID, date range, and precipitation data type. Once the API response is returned through the MCP server, the NCEI returns a structured precipitation data for requested time frame. Then Claude, it formats and presents the results in a conversational language. So just to show you how it looks like in Claude, basically, you can add any kind of MCP server in your Claude desktop. Over here, you have got a developer settings. And here you can see that I have the NCEI ADS MCP server currently running. And you can add any number of MCP servers to your Claude desktop. This is a previous conversation that I had. So I asked Claude, find me the highest temperature at Austin, Texas. This is the zip code in 2025 using the NCEI data source. So the conversation went like this, first, let me find the nearest weather station to that location. So Claude understands that now it has to call the fetch nearest station tool. It will use that particular tool to get the response. And this is the response that it returned, that this is the closest station, and this is the alternate stations that are present. Next, it will check the data coverage. but it noticed that there were no temperature values. The Tmax did not exist for this particular data station. So what it did was it checked another data station, that was the Austin International Airport data station. And then it was able to run the fetch data tool. This is the NCEI API that is being called, where you provide the data set, the DD summaries. So here, if you see, I do not provide it, the end date or the start date. It figured it out on its own. I did not provide it the data set name. It figured it out on its own, as well as the station ID that it got from the fetch, from the find nearest station tool. Once it has all these details, it is going to call the API and get a response from that API. Here you can see that this is the response that the API generated and it was returned to Claude. Once Claude has that, then it tells us the result that, okay, this was the highest temperature in Austin in 2025 and it was recorded on September 4th. So this is how you can query any kind of data that you want, whether it be temperature, if you want to find out rainfall, precipitation data, anything of that sort. So the real world impact is that it lowers down the initial friction that you want to access any particular kind of data, whether it be precipitation, whether it be temperature, and anything. Right now, this is just two simple tools. We have got 50 data variables, time saved. But this particular MCP server, it can be expanded to, multiple APIs, and it can be it shows a good understanding of how this is such an impactful way on using these different APIs that NCEI provides us. So, yep, this is how I would like to summarize by saying that, integrating MCP in Claude, it gave me, much easier access to, these particular data sources that we have. And it made like specialized knowledge accessible to everyone. And existing APIs can be efficiently wrapped with MCP servers using the standard SDKs and the best practices. So, yeah. Thank you so much. This was it from my side.
Thanks, Shubham. Let's see. I gave him like 25 minutes, but he finished within 15 minutes. And so we have a lot of time for questions. So any questions we have for Shubham right now? Feel free, yes, Rob, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. That's great. That's great. And I did my best to capture some of the essence of what you said and shared. Really appreciate your presentation. Also a member of NCEI, by the way.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, feel free to go in there and adjust what I've maybe noted. I have a question that kind of comes to mind. First of all, I love this, obviously. And the question that comes to my mind is, as we add a layer of abstraction, which is wonderful because it's abstracting to us as humans in the way we want to interact with the tools. How do you I think you get what I'm getting at here. How do we manage the versioning, the potential changing of the APIs deeper down, sort of maintain the trust in the tool that the human may have kind of gained by interacting with it for a little bit, but then setting it down for a couple months. So maybe if you could speak to something around how do you manage trust in this kind of paradigm?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, Rob. And, what I have understood, with my experience with MCP servers is that you always need to, thorough amount of testing is required before, put this into production or before it can be, turned usable into a usable version, right? So we have got these APIs, but we want to make sure that, whatever query that we are putting in our Claude, our tool descriptions that we are typing it out, I had to make like several iterations of making sure that Claude is able to understand what tool to call, how you need to fetch different parameters, how you need to fetch the data from the user input and then pass it to the API. And then the response that is returned by the API, you make sure that it is valid and how do you display it to the user. So I think with the changes in the API as well, you need to make sure that it is replicated in the MCP server. And I think, a lot of maintenance is required for the MCP servers as well.
Oh, cool. I could just say I would love to champion. Thank you. That's great. And really, I'd love to champion together the development of validated agentic workflows for community and also for our use within NOAA and other places like NOAA. So I'm going to count you as a person who wants to contribute to a library of such things. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
I have a response to that unless Josh is responding directly to that.
No, I'm not responding directly to that.
Let me just briefly throw in that one of the things that I've been exploring, and I don't quite have the tool set yet, is being able to evaluate like a whole agentic workflow of having a collection of prompts and what we would like for the response to be, and then being able to, it's almost like unit tests. If we have this sort of collection ready, that every time we tweak an MCP server or adjust a skill, being able to run through a test suite that says, okay, we have not made it worse. And there's some tooling. Of course, like the answer to all this is it's all evolving, even as we speak.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, when you're describing it, oh, that's unit testing. And not everyone's teaching unit testing anymore these days, but we should bring unit testing back. Josh?
Hi, I just had a quick comment. I often the MCP servers are advertised as or promoted as being great all-in-ones for like your demo for Claude to do something for you. But as someone who uses agentic coding a lot for coding op workflows, like I'm sure many of us do, one of the biggest time sinks that I have when using agentic coding is oftentimes the model or whoever you're using is fairly confident about the structure of data set, specifically things that are living on the cloud in NOAA, NCI, et cetera, and debugging. And so what I end up doing is writing my own API I don't write it. I ask them to make a new API for me, download the data, do a print or a structure command, and then show the AI what the actual data does look like, what the dimensions are, what the variable types are, et cetera. So one thing to just think about when you're developing these things is that MCPs, for a lot of people, they love to use it to have Claude do it for them. But if you're developing workflows more that I do, it's very helpful just for Claude to be able to just ping the data set and see what it actually does look like, so that when we develop a workflow that maybe is getting a little further downstream, we don't find out that, oh, wait a minute, this actually isn't structured the way we thought it was structured, or these variables aren't this particular type. So it's another way to think about the benefits of MCP for maybe someone who's doing more intermediate to advanced coding up.
Great. Thanks, Josh. I do see a comment from Ryan B. I assume that's Ryan Berkenheimer. What if underlying APIs change, interpreting from user side unexpected changes? Do you have any thoughts on that, Shubham?
Yeah, I think we expect a lot of changes on the API side as well, as we keep releasing new versions for these APIs. Similarly, the way that we maintain these APIs, we need to keep maintaining these MCP servers as well to make sure that they are still working in a correct way. You need to, as Ben pointed out over here as well, need to integrate testing, and you need to have those CI/CD pipelines. You need to make sure, you're setting up some maybe evals or some kind of testing frameworks as well to make sure everything works correctly. So yeah, maintenance is the key. Yeah.
Thanks, Shubham. I think it might transition really well to what Ben might talk about, and so I am gonna stop the question for Shubham for now, but we can come back to those conversations later on. Ben, do you want to go ahead next? While Ben is pulling up the slides, I want to thank him for stepping in at last minute because we have a speaker cancellation due to family emergencies. Thanks, Ben.
Oh, yes. Sure. Make me talk about my favorite subject yet again. Okay. So hi, I'm Ben Galuski. I'm a senior research software engineer at the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois. And I've been fortunate. One of the things I love about my job is that I get to work in all different fields. And so I have a professor at the University of Washington in high energy physics who's been really pushing this along. And I've learned a lot from him. And so that kind of got me into this space. And I'm gone from being overwhelmed to being like, oh, I'm very excited about this. So I kind of made up what this topic is going to be. Like, how can we, as a community, create and distribute these MCP servers? And so part of it is like that validation. But then how do we figure out what servers we need and come up with ways to make them easy to deploy for our own workflows? So I guess I'll be getting in a little deeper into some of the technical issues of MCP than maybe this talk had promised, but bear with me. So I'll talk a little bit about the different types of MCP server deployments, some frameworks for making it easier to develop these things, and then some ideas for distribution. And I should point out that this space is changing so ridiculously fast. I did a survey of this in the summer and then kind of tried to refresh it for this talk. And it's like, oh, wow, everything has changed between, in just a few months. So that's where we are. So there's MCP servers, and so your desktop client will interact with these, and it bears saying that this does, as far as I know, you can't use an MCP server with like a web-based chat, like you go to ChatGPT and just type in the questions. I don't believe they can talk to MCP servers, but of course, like I said, this is all changing so fast that may or may not be true anymore. But we saw how you can configure the desktop client to talk to an MCP server. And there are two transport protocols that are possible. One is just good old-fashioned standard I/O. And so you have your server just running on your desktop. The chat client will open it up as a process and just type your questions into it and receive the answers out just with plain old standard I/O. And that's great because it's super simple, low latency. It's running on your computer, so it has access to your file system. Maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. It's very easy to set up like secrets and different environment variables. So that's the simplest one. But then you have some interesting distribution problems. The other is a streamable HTTP interface. And so this, you have your MCP server running somewhere out in the cloud. It's just a proper service. It's got HTTP. There's, your kind of basic, well, not basic auth, but you have basic auth. You have different types of authentication models, which when I've played with it is super complicated to configure, but it's all there. So this is great because it's scalable. Anybody on the planet who has the right keys can access your server. And then, like we were talking about how to deal with upgrades, like you could have a single person or organization that's responsible for this server, validates it, updates it as new things happen. So it's pretty nice. I read in a couple of places that maybe this is the preferred transport mechanism for clients in the future. Read in some other places, maybe not. So we'll see. So we've got these two options: running on your desktop, running up in the cloud. So then there's like, how do you develop the frameworks? So first off, you have to choose your programming language. So really, JavaScript, because of the way that most of these chat clients are implemented as like Node package manager, managed JavaScript applications. JavaScript seems to be like the simplest thing, like the most digestible by the chat clients. And so there's a couple of popular frameworks, MCP framework, which is like not a great name to, or an easy name to search for, and XMCP. And so, these are opinionated frameworks like you used to from like something like Flask, that you don't have to think so much about, okay, how do I structure all this? It's like, here's how you do it. Just put your code here, and we'll take care of all the rest. So there's two popular JavaScript frameworks, and then there's a popular Python framework called FastMCP, which, again, it kind of looks a lot like FastAPI. Yeah, FastAPI. So it's a Python framework that does all the process management and I/O and things like that, and configuration. And so you just really focus on just your thing. So, like I said, for if you're doing local standard I/O deployment, JavaScript is like really the path of least resistance, because the clients already kind of know about that. And one of our bigger questions will be dependency management. And so you're already kind of living in a JavaScript world, and so it seems like a JavaScript framework will do pretty good about that. But if you're like me, I don't program JavaScript. Writing, database calls or algorithms in JavaScript is like, many of us in this field are not going to really enjoy. So Python seemed like the best way to go about doing this. But then we're going to have to think a little bit more about how we get all the dependencies installed and things like that. Although if you're running it on the cloud, then you put it in a Docker container and deploy it to Kubernetes or something like that, and probably pretty good. The really important question is, these MCP servers are great, but if they're too hard to install, then we're not going to really get a lot of benefit out of them. So what are our options for distribution? Well, one is just a GitHub repo and tell people, like, here you go, clone the repo, run it on your desktop, and it'll just work. That's the easiest for a developer. It's going to be more work for people to know how to install them, keeping up with versions, how they kind of relate to their own repo. There's definitely some issues there. Probably the obvious one for most of us who've been working in server land would be like build a custom deployment on a server, use the HTTP protocol. When I played with it this summer, auth was not obvious. Like how you tell your Claude client how to authenticate to this server that's running there. They say all sorts of things about OAuth and bearer tokens. I'm sure someone will figure this out and come up with a better recipe. And then, of course, you have to host it somewhere. I've got access to a Kubernetes cluster that I can pretty easily put things up on, but not everyone has that. So, where do we host it? And then how you configure your client is a bit fiddly to work out. So maybe this is good. I mean, this certainly feels like how we've traditionally just deployed stuff. Let's see. And then something that I've been experimenting with more recently, I think it's a pretty recent standard, is the Claude plugin model. And so a plugin, you can have skills, which I talked about on Tuesday, which are like little hint files, agent definitions. You can also put MCP servers right into a plugin. And so a plugin is really just some JSON metadata and a zip file. Put it on a public repo. And so we know how to do that. The plugins are all versioned, so that's pretty nice. That kind of fits into our ethos for like what we like to have reproducibility. So if you're doing some work and publishing a paper, you might want to say, okay, and this was all generated using this version of the MCP server, while it might have moved on, but you can kind of get some reproducibility. It's very easy to install them. It works nicely with standard I/O. And just like Anthropic came up with MCP, and then the industry pretty much said, okay, yeah, this is a good idea, so we'll call it a standard. So Anthropic seems to be doing a pretty good job of coming up with good things, declaring them a standard, and convincing the industry to follow suit. So I believe plugins kind of work with codecs and a couple other things. There's some interesting stuff there to look at. Again, it's all changing all the time. So just briefly, what would it look like to make your MCP server a plugin? So the plugin, again, is just a folder in a repo with some JSON metadata. So here's our plugin folder. It's a subdirectory inside our well, no, I guess it would be the top level directory is your plugin. Here's JSON, which configures, describes what's going on in here. And then you just stick your Python code in here and pyproject.toml, and all this code can now go inside there into a GitHub repo that has commits and all that kind of stuff. And then to actually install it, actually part of your plugin is you create this mcp.json. So this means what we saw earlier in that the changes to the Claude client to configure it for an MCP server. You can define this in your plugin, so you the developer knows how to do this. And so this just says, here's my name, and in order to get around like all the dependency stuff, we're going to use UV package manager, and so we'll just say UV run, and plugin root is when I install the plugin on my desktop, it'll be in this plugin root directory, and so then I can find my main.py and maybe pick up some environment variables and other things to pass into it, which would be a great way. That's how you can pick up tokens for like the service that you want your MCP server to talk to. The user can specify that as an environment variable, and then it gets picked up by the MCP server and then sent out to the other service. And then just to install it and test it in Claude, and you would just say /plugin marketplace add. And so that's like the URL of our GitHub repo, which is our marketplace, which is where all the plugins for a community could be published. You install a plugin name, and then to see if it's running, you just say /MCP, and it'll tell you the status of all the MCP servers that are installed. So, pretty good. I think somewhere in here you can specify the version. So if you want to stick to a particular version rather than taking on whatever gets released, you can do that. So pretty straightforward. So where could we go from here? Well, I think this is going to be the discussion for the rest of this session, but just a couple of hints. So we could, in our ECIP GitHub organization, create a marketplace, which is just a publicly readable repo. We might think about creating plugins by field so that, climate, cryo, ocean, but I might have different sets of plugins, which is have these MCP servers and other things, and then encourage pull requests, and off we go. So let's talk about this and see where we're going. So I just wanted to say thank you to my professor at the University of Washington, Gordon Watts, who really inspired so much of this work. And then I get some of my funding is from a high energy physics grant that I'm on, who's helping me to kind of do thinking about LLMs, and then also some generous support from the state of Illinois. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Ben. I think I promise it's going to be high level, but you got into the details, which is great too. So. Right. Thanks. Any questions? I think you did very clear, so nobody has questions.
Or too much detail, and
which people may need marinates a little bit and before the question kicks in.
I've got a question.
Yeah, Corey, go ahead.
It'd be great to hear a little bit just in terms of applications of some of the contexts in which you found this. Like, great, you spin up an MCP server. For your work, Ben, I'd love to hear about what you're using this for, what kind of things. Is it data set access? Is it support with the coding assistance process, so it's plugging into documentation? Like, yeah, how you're thinking about the uses for this in your domain.
Here's a couple of examples from like wildly different domains, so have fun. One is in particle physics, saying, okay, I want a data set that has, Monte Carlo simulations of this process at this energy level. And it winds up with a data set name, which is like this long. My screen's not big enough. And so I'm working with some people there to query a metadata database. So you can just say an English language query of, I want a data set that looks like this, and it'll figure out what the data set name is that will solve your problems. So I could imagine, we could do things, I don't know, in earth science, I know there's like different resolutions, different time resolutions. And so it could be that you would need an MCP server to figure out which data set to hit. I don't know. I think in general, earth science data sets are a lot better behaved than high energy physics data sets. And then another one that is really so much fun is I've been working in cloud data lakes at the University of Illinois of like census data, weather data, all sorts of different things. And then there's like DuckDB, which is like a data warehouse, cloud data lake query engine that you can, it knows the schemas of all the tables in the data lake. And this, we don't need a custom MCP server. DuckDB has already written one, but it could do things like figure out, take an English language query and turn it into SQL and get you answers back. But yeah, I think we're going to be maybe brainstorming some other things that we wish we had as MCP servers. Douglas, is that probably where we're heading next?
We're going to have discussions, but I think my answer is I think the MCP servers for different use cases will be looking different. And I think what Shubham presented early on is like the MCP server is really helping people to make sense of the data in a more natural language setting where some of the conversation happened in the chat or like you just had that can be more for developers, like what MCP servers can be used to discover the right data sets and for the research or for development activities. And so I think that there are spaces for both, right? That those for more like developers and how to find the right data sets or handling those data for the development activities. And then there's also the public facing where like how can we actually let the agents or language models to get the data from the right source and in the right way, because to avoid those hallucination problems as well. So I think that those are different groups of use cases I can think there.
And I love Puneet's question in chat of spatial knowledge graphs. Do
you want to address that?
What is OGC?
Open Geospatial Consortium.
So is there a database behind?
Well, they publish standards
right.
for different things.
Right? GeoSparkle. Yes. And so there might be, this is from Ryan. So there might be already a GeoSparkle MCP server. If not, there should be one. And that would be something that would probably solve a lot of those kinds of problems if you've got that kind of a database. Love it.
Ryan, I'm not sure if you are able to unmute yourself, but if you are, do you want to answer the question from Puneet? Okay. No worries.
No.
Thanks for putting it in the chat, and then we'll capture the chat as well. And yeah, I think if you don't mind, I think leaving your contact information, maybe Puneet can follow up with you via email as well. Great. Any other questions before we move into some of the broad discussion among the entire group here? Let's see. Okay. All right. If you all want to go into our Google Notes documents, which I have listed for questions led us to discuss. I am going to start the screen sharing again from my end. Okay. Right, make sure I'm sharing the right window so you're not seeing my Slack. Okay, I think I'm sharing the right window. First of all, if you have not signed in for the session, please do, so we can keep track of the participation. And if you scroll down to the thanks for Rob taking the notes of the presentations, and in the next 20-ish minutes, what we are going to do is to trying to brainstorm some of the ideas and also answering those questions. So in the next 5 minutes, I would ask you all go into Google Docs and then just type in the Google Doc about those 4 questions. The first one is, what are the tools and services you or your data user use the most for accessing the Earth and space science data? And so in this case, we're not talking about MCP, just thinking about the tools and services that you've seen or the most valuable for the users. And then the second question is to see are any MCP development for the tools and data sets that we have seen mentioned above, right? So I think somebody already put in some of the links in the documents of MCP data server there. And then the third question is that what are questions or concerns you have on the MCP development or the usage before you think the community embrace MCP? That can be technical questions, technical barriers, or other, like, for example, the questions that Rob asked early on about trust or validation, those type of questions. That can be technical, can also be more human or like human related. And then the last question is what roles can ECIP as a community play to enable the MCP for the Earth and space data community? So those are 4 questions, and in the next 5 minutes, it's going to be an individual solo working time. Just type in, just add new lines if you need to. So this document is there for people to contribute to. And also just to mention that we have an Australian hub during the January meeting. So the Australian participants may jump into the Google Docs as well later on when they sign in to this document. So this is a way that we can keep the contribution brainstorming international. And so we're not limiting to who can be here right now at this time. So yeah, don't be shy, and then putting as many tools and data services that you use the most, or you think your users that use the most for those data curators or data managers out there. So it's a way to brag about the data and tools in the question 1. So I'm expecting more answers in question 1 than others, but the other ones are also, if you have any specific contribution, that'll be great as well. Thanks everyone for the solo working session. I think, like I expected, we have a lot entry to the dataset and tools in the question, which is expected. So I'm gonna share my screen again here. I want to make sure everyone is the size of the text good enough for people to see. Right. So the first question was about the tools and services, and I noticed one comment about using Cloud Code to do a custom API on the fly, and so have abandoned the use of those pre-built packages. If I were to guess, that might be Josh put in that, but is that you, Josh, who put in that comment?
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate more on how are you using Cloud Code just to do the data access?
Well, I just mean, usually many of those packages are pretty good, but sometimes you run into restrictions on whether it's file limits or maybe I want all the countries and not just ping one country at a time. And so instead of having to deal and research about the prepackaged Earth Access or all the similar packages that are off the shelf, Cloud is very good. If I just go to the website, I find whatever NCI data set I'm looking at, I give it the PDF for the API, and then I say, I need to be able to do X, Y, and Z. Just write it for me real quick. And if I have time, I'll package it up and put it on Git or something, so it's not just for my personal use, but sometimes it takes just seconds for them to write something custom for you to do exactly what you want, that I don't fidget around with figuring out if something off the shelf does what I want. I guess that's what I was getting at.
Okay. Cool. Thanks, Josh. And so just want to see in this first question, like anyone want to specifically highlight some of those tools and then think that might be and if you are thinking about maybe some of the MCP might be useful based on what you have heard so far. Don't speak up all at once.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, another Josh.
It's another Josh and Henry. We're together, just watching it together. This is Henry. Yeah, one of we're learning a lot. We have some students that were just gung ho, and we gave them a green light, and they just dove in and started writing code like crazy because they were excited about what MCP could be, might be, is, and so forth. And one of the places, we still have a lot to learn, but one thing was just in trying to bridge the gap between deterministic and probabilistic behavior by the chatbots, so that, and I'm sorry if this was covered earlier. I missed the first half of the talks, but that was one of the things that we discovered, is that the other chatbots could really be, from one query to the next, it was just it was unpredictable what the results would be, and so by being smart about the MCP implementation, those results could start being a little more deterministic and repeatable.
Well, thanks. You said Henry?
That's right.
Okay, cool. Great. Thanks. Others? I see there are a lot of chats going on in the chat as well. So for the second question, here is just trying to see what are any existing MCP developments. So I do see Josh and Henry at USM mentioned the connection to the World Ocean database. Do you want to say more about the specific connection for that tool?
We did use Earth Earth Mover and Array Lake, and it took a lot. There's a lot behind the scenes for that, and we would really like to just have anybody use it and give us feedback about what's good, bad, ugly, indifferent, and so forth.
This interface looks
anyone on the calls, please give it a shot.
great. So I guess it's a call for volunteers who are using World Ocean database and want to ask or want to test it out. And this would be a good place to do. And do you want to leave a contact info so they can provide your feedback?
That's a great idea, Douglas. Thanks, man. I'll do that.
Yep. Okay, and I think, Aaron, I'm going to put you on the spot because there is an ESIP lab funded project that also works on MCP, use MCP server as well, right?
Yeah, there's one that's going to explore kind of using MCPs to take in natural language to do mapping operations, more or less. So yeah, that will be kicking off soon.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. Yeah, we may invite them to give a presentation in a future our monthly meeting there. Okay, I think there are also a lot of entries, even more than I expected, on question 3 specifically. And I think there is a question, or there's a group of questions about security there. For those who put in the question about security, any specific things you want to speak out about or elaborate more on your concerns? I see Ben, Ben, go ahead.
Sure, why not? So, security is, of course, a concern. If you are running your MCP server using standard I/O on your desktop, then as long as you trust the source of the MCP server, then it's all just like there's no internet connection at all. So that seems pretty safe. And then one of the nice things is that you can pick up, there's another question about API keys. You can just pick them up from environment variables. And so, again, it's all just on your computer, and that seems to be the most secure. It doesn't let you do things like that amazing Ocean data chat client that's just out there on the internet. So instead, this is running it on your desktop or using like Claude Code or something like that. But if you're concerned about security, you can just run it locally, and that should take that away.
Thanks, Ben. And I think there's some of the interactions in your response there. Michael, do you want to continue the security threat discussion? Michael Shaw?
Yeah, sure. I guess just in reading around, I'm seeing that if, for example, using MCP to assess maybe even vulnerabilities in sort of more complex environments, or in like CI/CD pipelines that are having to talk with registries and version control repositories and things. I just wonder how truly secure is it, and having to manage all those related tokens and that kind of a thing. Probably a lot of different sort of vectors or sort of attack surfaces of that much kind of communication when using them in those capacities where they might actually be very, very promising, but maybe there are vulnerabilities there to think about. I don't know.
So one of the scary things to watch out for is, so like if your MCP server has write tokens, tokens that are able to write or update or delete, there's some really interesting vectors where the prompt injection, where you're able to, somewhere along the chain, there's a prompt that gets in that says, and please delete the entire GitHub history. And if you've given the agent those keys, then that's what happens. So, we all know that trying to downscale keys as much as possible is always a good behavior. And certainly if you're handing keys to your car to a large language model, all the more reasons to downscope as much as you can.
Yeah. And sort of maybe a little follow-up there, are there alternatives to MCP where there might be a bit more human in the loop sort of intervention at kind of key, sort of stop points or key points in, again, sort of the context of using it to facilitate setting up, different pipelines, CI/CD, and deciding whether or not, maybe containers are scannable, Docker containers are scannable by institutions, cybersecurity folks, instead of just unleashing it and letting it find ways to go. Are there alternatives to MCP that might have more sort of human intervention along the way?
Yeah, it's not so much MCP is not the question here. It's like the agent that's driving it. And so like if you're using Claude Code, there's a great command line option like dangerously ignore permissions when you run Claude Code, and it won't ever ask you about anything it's about to do. And so don't do that unless you really have it sandboxed. And so the Claude Code agent by default will always say, I'm about to cut this, should I? And so you do have that possibility, but I think you're looking at much more automation where it's like a CI workflow. There's no human involved at all. And so, yeah, make sure it can't do anything bad.
Yeah, I guess the first principle would be do no harm, right? I do see a few of the questions here is along the lines of the kind of like validation, trust, and especially when it's getting to the interacting with the users and how to ensure that the data is interpreted in the right way. And so wondering if anyone have any thoughts on that topic. And I think we touched on that maybe a little bit on the development side, maybe the testings, but what are other aspects we should consider to enhance or ensure the trust when especially thinking about using MCP as a medium to enable the users to use those data. Right, you are typing a lot in the chat. It's hard for me to keep up with. Any thoughts on the trust and the validation aspects? It's not saying that you have to have a solution. It's saying that what do you think we should consider as a community?
So, hey, it's
Go ahead,
Corey
Ken.
Levinson here speaking. One thing that came out of my radar recently is Moxie. I can't remember his last name, but the developer from Signal has recently started a project working on an end-to-end encrypted LLM chat experience. And, he's got his whole ethics and reasons for working on stuff like that. But I think if privacy is a concern, then that's a project worth keeping an eye on. I think most of the Well, like concerns about security, I think, have much less to do with like the MCP development and what's the LLM that you're using. Because really, MPC is just like with all of these systems, you're just engaging with the LLM, and the MCP is just a tool for the LLM to like make more efficient queries and ground truth data and stuff. So when I think of security, I think it's first and foremost about like what's the model that we're using, that customers or users are first engaging with, and what's the security model of those.
Thanks, Corey. What about others? Think about the testing and hallucination and trust. If not, we can look at the last question, which I think there are a lot of interesting suggestions. And I think one is really looking at what are the other groups within ESIP has been main interest in the MCP developments, and also hosting the development, use, and lessons learned sessions, and benchmarks for validation of MCP servers, and they're integrating diverse structured and formatted data streams into workflows, and host the MCP, I guess it's not MCL, plugin template repo, and also looking at making data documentation. So I think that's talking about AI-ready data, about data documentation, and how that interacts with the MCP, and with working with LLM or agents, and backend workflows. All right, interesting comments for this one. Can I ask who put this one in the document and say more about it? Nobody want to claim it? That's okay. We can get back to it. And there's also a discussion about ontology engineering from the ESIP end, which I think there's a lot of interest in the ESIP about ontology. For the person who's typing about ontology and the talks, if you can provide a link to the talk from Chris, that would be great, if that is available.
It's Corey again. There was actually an ESIP talk. I can't remember which group it was, but I'll pull it up. Yeah, I think it might have been it was either Semantic Technologies or there was a harmonization cluster call.
Okay.
A few months ago, but I can drop it in.
Yeah, if you have the link to that recording, that'd be great. Excellent. And I am gonna stop here for this, like, 4 questions we're trying to gather. And thanks for those who have put in your inputs, but this document is going to remain open, and so you can still contribute. If this brilliant idea strike you when you shower or eating dinner tonight, please feel free to come back and then put that information in. And I am going to switch us back to the Mentimeter. So let's see. Where is my Mentimeter? All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. And then share again of, yes, this is where the Mentimeter is. So if you can go into Mentimeter again, so you can either use the link was in the chat before, or go to menti.com, use the code 21507649, and just looking at after the session today, how likely are you going to interact with MCP? So there are 4 statements. Want to learn more about MCPs and want to experiment with the developments and will use MCP for the work for your own workflows. See MCP bundles or development for the open environmental data that being discussed or as a ESEP community. So let's see. Definitely strong interest on the learning more about MCPs in future events. We'll give it a few more, give it 1 or 2 more minutes, because I think we have 26 people online. We're getting a dozen responses right now. I think there's a strong interest on learning more, and also some already thinking about experiments with MCP for their own workflows, as well as in the development process of MCPs. Right? I don't think things are moving now, so I'm going to move on to our final poll questions. I expected that the first question is going to get the most strong interest, and so now what you said you want to learn more about MCP. So what do you want to learn more about MCPs in the future events? If we do a session or doing another monthly meeting focused on the MCP. Collaboration on community MCP servers, great. Applications, use cases, and case studies. And reference and resources for MCP newbies. And I'm gonna see, Ben, if you have any recommendations of resources that we can include in the documents for people to use at their leisure.
In general, I found this is so confusing and the documentation is so fractured. I use the Perplexity AI search engine generally. Like, I don't even just tell me what to do.
So ask AI to teach you about how to build a tool to make the AI better. That sounded like very convoluted. We almost become a minion for the AIs. Demos, accessing servers which require password. Okay, that's one for specific requests about MCP servers with authentication involved in it. Actually, I think I see a theme of use cases or demonstrations of how this can be used in the right way and good way to relevant for the community. And also lessons learned. Excellent. I am going to keep the Menti open for those who are still typing. And so we can wrap up the session for today. First of all, I want to thank everyone for joining the session. And I think it was fun as a intro and more like entry-level sessions about MCPs, dive into it, and then see some of the examples, but also talking about some issues we want to learn more about in your future events. And so definitely you can expect more events on MCP and some other probably use cases and demos about the MCPs that's relevant for ESEP community. And with that, I want to thank Ben and Shubham for presenting, and also thanks to Maddie, Cheyenne for helping the session, as well as Aaron. Thanks, Aaron. And other than that, Aaron, do you have anything you want to announce for ESEP?
Just the Birds of the Feather Slido that's going on right now. Let me pull that up real quick if I can find it.
Yes.
Get your thoughts out there so that you can start your group. I should have this on hand, but now I got
Aaron,
to
I threw it in there.
Awesome. You're amazing. Yeah, please go there and submit some topics and see if we can get some more groups out there.
Excellent. Thanks, Aaron. And to give people a specific time, I think this starts at 3:15 Eastern time or 3 Eastern time.
Yes, I believe so.
3 or 3:15. I give you two choices.
Coffee break, 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. Eastern time. Yep.
Excellent. So yeah, hopefully to see some of you have the coffee break for the birds feather topics. Right. Thank you everyone for attending the session today.